So, my name is Jimmie Lindstrom. I come from PayPal. I'm going to talk about our Mobile SDK today. So, we're going to go first who we are. So, also discuss a bit what's a Mobile SDK. Secondly, we're going to talk about the different version, when they're getting released. Because we have released a version in America and one in Australia. And we're going to have a joint one coming up. PayPal Mobile SDK version 1.2, that's what we're currently up to. We will have 2.0 released quite soon. We're also going to talk how you integrate the Mobile SDK. We will discuss something called verifier payment, and it's very important. I'm going to press on that point a lot of times during the presentation. We're going to talk more in detail on that. We're going to have a question and answer. Okay? So introduction. So my name is Jimmie Lindstrom. I'm a sales engineer at PayPal. We also have my great manager, Spiro Rockers here, who's the head of sales engineering. So both of us working in a sales engineering team where we go out to integrate with merchants. We also go to this kind of events to discuss the products. Oops, that was the wrong button. So what's the Mobile SDK? Well, the Mobile SDK is a native integration for both Android and iOS. It's integrating both PayPal and credit card on a very, very easy way. You can get up and running. You know, all of you guys are quite nifty engineers. I'll say within hours you can get it to work. It's a great user experience, and yeah, it just works out of the box, simple. So the first version was 1.0. We released in America only. It's a US only release with native API. We've got a card IO scanning in there as well. It was credit card and PayPal payments. Because it was US only, it worked quite well over there, but of course it didn't work in Australia. So last week we released it, a couple of weeks ago we released it in Australia in APAC. It's now currently supporting multi-currency. We go into more in detail what currencies are supporting and what languages. It's also, unfortunately, currently just PayPal only. It will be credit card supported in the upcoming weeks, potentially in a month. So version 2 will be Q4 2013, will be worldwide released, the same version all over the world. It will contain auth caption. So right now we currently only have a sales model. That means that everything is a straight sale. You process something, it goes and it takes the money right away. Auth caption model is that you're authorizing a certain amount and later on, inside a flow or outside a flow, you're capturing the money. We will also have a future payment such as store my payment details for later on for both PayPal and for credit card. The future versions will have billing address. You can retrieve the billing address, select all payment option if you have one or many credit cards, for example, inside your PayPal wallet or other funding sources such as balance or bank funding. We'll also have a card IO scanning where you can actually scan the expiry date and some other features as well. But most, and we want to press on this, we want your feedback on what kind of features you want inside of this.
Sorry, stupid question, perhaps. What's card IO?
Card IO is when you can put a credit card in front of your phone. You can scan it instead of typing it in.
So basically, it's a service that we purchased sometime this year. It was called Card IO. It doesn't really mean anything. It's basically just the ability to scan the credit card details without having to enter it in. So we purchased that company, as I said, sometime this year and integrated their services into ours.
Yep. Okay. So the current version, Mobile SDK 1.2, it's available for both, as I said, iOS and Android. It's currently only PayPal in Australia. Outside Australia, you can use PayPal and credit card. It's Remember Me both for credit card and PayPal. That means that you can process a payment with PayPal. You can log in with PayPal, use username and password or mobile phone number and PIN. And it will remember you on the next transaction inside the app. You can turn the app off, for example, for an hour or two, or it takes up to 12 hours, as long as it's caching inside your application. It's, as I said, multi-currency. This is the currencies I had confirmed today. There will be much more coming up for next release. This is the multi-language support you have. It's a bit hard to read, so yeah. All of this presentation is going to be on USB sticks later on, so if you want to know more details about anything, it's going to be available. So there's two different flows we're going to go through today. The first one is the PayPal flow, that's the top one there, and the second bottom one is the card scanning and manually entering on credit cards. So let's start off with the PayPal flow. The PayPal flow is that you bring for your card for your application, you select I want to pay now. PayPal renders natively in your application the PayPal screen where you can select in between PayPal and credit card. You have then clicked Pay with PayPal. You will be prompted to enter your email address and password, or as you can see later on, further down log in with a PIN. That means you enter your mobile phone number and your preset PIN code. We'll at this stage just confirm the payment by pressing send payment, and the payment is done. If you use credit card, you have two different options. As I said, you can scan the credit card, or you can manually enter a credit card. So this is the card I/O I was talking about before. So you will put your card in front, you have pressed pay with card, you can scan it. It will pick up the credit card number, but you still have to enter the expiry and the CVV. The other option you can do is press keyboard. For example, if you're in a dark room, for example, it's not enough light to scan. You would, for example, you want to manually enter it. You press in the details, you press done, and both of these screens will end up on confirm and charge credit card. From here, you will get the opportunity to send a receipt. You don't have the opportunity to send a receipt from PayPal because any PayPal transaction will automatically send a receipt from the PayPal server. Next time you come back, save the payment details. Next time you come back, if you've done a PayPal payment or if you've done a credit card payment, you will see your details stored inside the application. You're able to clear this one if you, for example, use your friend's application or use your friend's credit card or PayPal account. So when you arrive next time, when you're clicking to pay in the cart, your arrive is automatically going to come here, and from there, when you pay, you arrive on the payment confirmation page. So,
Quick question, maybe I didn't say it. Was there an option on the previous screen to not save the credit card information?
No. It automatically saves it in there, but you could theoretically clear it through an API call, yes. Yeah, valid point. Version 2, as I said, is going to be released in Q4. Hopefully, I've been told it might be in October, but I'm not going to promise it, so let's say Q4. It makes it a bit more buffet in it. As I said, it's going to be Q4 as a worldwide release. That means US and Australia and the rest of the world is going to have it at the same time. Auth capture model, as I described before, it means you can authorize and capture the payment in the flow or outside the flow. Future payments, this is similar to what we have today, but it's actually unlimited time and you have an option to store or not store. Login with PayPal is very similar to Facebook Connect and so on, but this is going to be natively in an app. So this is not as such it's bundled into the Mobile SDK, but it can be used for other purchases. Also other purposes than a purchase as well. It could be just as authentication piece inside your mobile application. Verify payment via REST API. Currently, you will need to verify your payment in two different places. All the PayPal transaction through an API called adaptive payment, and all the credit card payment for something called a new REST API. From the next release, everything is going to go through the REST API, and adaptive payments is going to be discontinued from the mobile application.
Just a quick point on the login with PayPal. So I mean, this stuff is all native code, right? So it's through an SDK. A lot of these services are already available for your app through a web view. So this doesn't mean just because this is not available right now that you can't do similar things. And in terms of login with PayPal, I mean, one of the great things about it is it essentially gives you the opportunity to leverage our user base. So 160 million accounts globally, almost 6 million accounts in Australia. So as you're developing applications, you're requiring people to log in and register with your service. You know, it's relatively onerous if you pick up a new application. Okay, I've got to register with these guys again, provide my details. I mean, obviously you can use Facebook and what have you, but if there is a payments capability or a related capability to your app, it makes more sense for you to ask your customers for their financial, it's something that identifies them at a financial level as opposed to a social level. So, totally up to you guys. You can offer multiple ways of doing it, but it's a great alternative to the social aspect of the type of login that you would normally get.
Okay. Integrating with PayPal Mobile SDK. So what you need to do first is set up a developer account at PayPal. You need to go to developer.paypal account, developer.paypal.com. You need to create an application inside the system. So an application contains, for this specific application, contains credentials with APIs and also an app ID you need to put inside your app. You download the latest mobile SDKs. I will have them all on USB sticks over here, but of course on GitHub you have the latest version all the time. You can just retrieve whenever we do a new release. Each of the SDKs have description on how to do it and sample code and sample app inside as well. So it's very easy to get up and running. Good to know before you start. When you work with the mobile SDK, you have 3 different type of levels of transactions. In terms of, you have one called no network, that means you're mocking all the calls. So they're perfect in an offline environment, or if you're gonna have a continuous build or whatever to test everything. You also have a sandbox environment, so that's all sandbox environment that you use to transfer fake money as such in between PayPal accounts. And you have the production, that's a real live production. That's what you're gonna need to have when you submit it to the App Store. Disable credit cards. For the moment you will need to disable it, and that's one setting. It's skip credit card equal to true in both iOS and Android, and this will remove the whole rendering of the credit card option as a payment option. Moving on. So I mentioned verify payments before. Why do you need to verify a payment? Well, it's a couple of different reasons. A mobile device, transactions from that can be intercepted in the middle. And what you need to do is to have your mobile application after a transaction, the event is raised on the PayPal Mobile SDK that the payment is complete. You need to call your merchant server, your APIs, to communicate in the backend with our payment APIs. There's 2 different, as I said, it's adaptive payment for PayPal transactions and REST. And this is just the current release, the next release, everything's going to go for REST. And what you do is you verify the payment through there, you make sure that the payment is approved, the currency is correct, the amount is correct, and the person who paid is correct. Because if you have a man in the middle kind of scenario there, you can all imagine what happens if you start giving out goods or services for your application but you haven't verified it in the back end. This is for the mobile SDK payment response that you will have, and what you will need to look for is the payer key, application ID, and you need to pass it through the adaptive payments API. So this is for PayPal transaction. You pass it into the endpoint there, and you will have a response, and this is what you need to check for. Very similar response when it's a credit card. You look for an API payment ID, you pass it in, and you have a set of verifications you need to do on your side. Any questions? Yes?
2-part question actually. One, as a customer, can you actually go back and look into your account in the past 1 year, 2 year, where all you spent, food, entertainment, transit, right?
Yeah, definitely. Just log up. Sorry.
And the second part was, as a developer, can I access that information given the security concerns? What is available and what's not?
Okay. So from a customer point of view, you can log into your PayPal account and everything would be inside your PayPal account, all your previous transactions. If line items are passed in for the transaction, depending on, you might be shopping in an e-shop somewhere, you might use a mobile SDK, you will see all the information that depending on what they have passed in. As from a merchant point of view, if that's what you mean, no, you cannot see for a specific user exactly what they have bought from other places, you can only see what they bought from you. Does that answer your question?
Were you after an API to do a transaction search against a specific user's account?
I'm actually also thinking of how these different applications offer these open APIs for any sort of application. For example, Foursquare or Facebook, they have these check-ins, so you can see where people are looking, and they also allow developers to use that data, to look at cities, investments, affordability, financial capabilities of individuals. So can you do that with PayPal? Is that an open API? And you can use that data. You said about 60 million users, something like that?
No, 160 globally.
160.
Yeah.
So can you, maybe not,
So,
we don't want to see credit card information or individual names, but just...
So at the moment we don't have any services to aggregate any of that data. Depending on the kind of relationships that we have with individual organizations, there may be things that we can share, but it's definitely not an API-based service that we have access to right now. We are looking at things in terms of sharing information about a customer as they do checkout or if they do log in with PayPal. So preferences, for instance, if they like red shoes or the size, I'm a medium shirt, that type of thing. So we'll be passing richer data back to merchants or partners during the checkout experience. But in terms of creating a more open API where you can query against our particular user base, no, there aren't any plans to do that at this point.
You talked about the app holding on to payment information like credit card information, but that's on the user next time. Is that held on the app on the phone, or is that held in the back-end server? I'm just curious about things like PCI compliance.
No, so that's held on the app inside the caching data in there. So you can clear it from the app, or you can clear it directly in the user interface as well.
Okay, so how are you dealing with things like PCI compliance? So as a merchant, would you be using this? You're now, in theory, holding the card there. I suppose you're not, though, because it's on the mobile phone and it's in the user's hands. But
so the information will be sent to PayPal from the beginning. If it was a credit card, it will be tokenized and sent back to you. Okay. So you would hold a token that only works for that application, for that merchant.
So
it will not
holding the credit card information.
Exactly.
Holding a token, but the credit card data is not on the
For PayPal, you will hold a payer ID.
Okay.
And it will only work, as I said, the same thing for that merchant, for that application.
Okay. So it's by merchant, by application. Yeah.
Yep. And that's, sorry.
There's a fuzzy area around PCI compliance and applications at the moment. The schemes have just come out with some new rules, I think about a month or so ago. Not 100% across them, but it puts the onus back on the individual issuer. So from a PayPal perspective, it puts the onus back on us, or it puts the onus back on the issuing bank the acquiring bank to create the rules around what PCI looks like for applications. Because it's a completely different world. It's not a server, client server relationship. It is you are holding that device. It is your device. You have security on that device. If it gets compromised, the impact is relatively low. The attack vector is relatively low. So, from our perspective, as long as you're using our SDK, you don't necessarily have to go and get your app PCI compliant. You don't have to go through any PCI compliance tests for that particular app.
The screenshots you showed before were branded in PayPal sort of colours and things like that. Is that standard or set?
Yes. So the way it works, I probably should have had a bit of a wider example when you go through adding things to the cart and coming to the checkout, but I didn't want to drag it out too much. So I only showed the 4 screens at the physical PayPal side. And yes, they are PayPal branded, and currently no, you can change them. When you log out on the desktop version, you can brand the pages if you use Express Checkout and so on. Add your logo and change the color. Potentially something in line with that could occur. If we see a big need for it, the people wanting to have it, then definitely something to consider.
But just a point on that. I mean, I think this stuff for us is, like moving us into the realm where we're pretty uncomfortable as an organization. If you think about the way PayPal works, it's a hosted platform, right? So all your PayPal transactions, you go through a hosted flow, you go to PayPal, you can see the URL, you can see the lock. It's branded PayPal. Yes, we allow you to customize it, and our clients and customers can co-brand it with us, but it is PayPal. And from a consumer's perspective, I feel safe. I'm going to PayPal.
For sure.
No one's harvesting my information. I don't have a dodgy developer just sucking my credentials out because they're hosting it on their own site. So this is a big move, a big departure for us of these types of capabilities, because in essence this is now inside an app. We have no control of that app. We can't see what people are doing on that app necessarily, and someone really could just basically copy our screens and pretend that this is a PayPal checkout. So there's an element of trust and a lot of stuff that we have to do in the background to make sure that people aren't doing that. And again, from an attack vector perspective, it's a relatively minimal exposure for our customers. But at the same time, we still want to maintain the fact that this is a PayPal checkout. You're logging into your PayPal account. You're using your PayPal credentials. So it needs to look like a PayPal branded type of an experience. It is embedded within your application, so it is part of your application. So it doesn't sort of minimize or detract from the experience that your application is trying to expose.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you had any assurances from Apple that they're not going to start banning applications just because they include your SDK, because they prefer people using applications instead?
So we have had mobile Apple SDKs available for the last 4 years, is that right, roughly? So this is replacing the two current libraries we have, MPL and MECL. And both of them have been existing for a long time and are currently been approved for the last 4 years. So no, we don't really see the risk of it, potentially, but...
Because like I'm thinking if I want to make something available for purchase, which is like exactly the kind of thing that they would want me using in-app purchase for, like unlock extra levels on my game.
So let's be clear about what this is for. This is for physical goods, not for digital goods. So you can't use any other payment services other than Apple, well, iTunes, your iTunes account for any digital goods subscription services. So, sorry, you disagree?
I just think it's general.
Hey, look, we don't agree with policy.
I'm disagreeing with Apple's policy.
Yeah.
If you can buy physical goods without getting the why can't you buy digital goods?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And there's smart players out there, Amazon, other players are figuring out other ways to encourage people to buy off platform, but that becomes a cat and mouse sort of game between you and Apple and their rules.
So does that mean that recurring payments is not feasible?
If it's physical, yes. If it's for digital content, no. And where it comes to services, there's a bit of a grey area around services and what you can do for services. So, if it's if it's for your movie tickets, because you're consuming that in the physical world, you're okay. If it's something that, like, if it's a game, that kind of a recurring thing, then basically no.
I think some games like Blizzard, real quick, they do have a subscription base where you can use your PayPal if you want to.
Sorry.
Blizzard, it's a company that they make various games and all that stuff. If you have any online subscriptions that you want to go through them, they've used PayPal as several examples.
Yeah. So the way they get around that is essentially if you pay for your services off platform, that's great. However, if you offer the subscription or the service on the device, you have to have iTunes. So as long as you don't point anybody to that service and that payment screen, then you're okay, you're covered. That's basically how a lot of these, the big organizations get around it.
Okay. Well, just back a step, you said you can't do branded, your own branded checkout, but if you use PayPal Pro and use the credit card facility, that's 100% your own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's totally an option you can do.
Does that work with App Store? So I know like big companies have developed their own apps using them.
Yeah. So, if you look at, when we say unbranded, if you look at the credit card experience, it's pretty much unbranded.
Yeah.
It's more the PayPal experience that's more branded. Absolutely, you could use our APIs right now. You can use anybody's APIs to do a checkout experience. The effort we're trying to put into the SDK is to streamline, the ability to take payments without having to do all the work that you do.
And make it as simple and fast as possible without having the PCI problems as well.
You mentioned sort of the possibility of people basically just making screens that look like this and tricking people. Have you got any way for the end user to actually look up what is a verified application and do that? In fact, a reverse lookup to say, I want to download this app, it's got a PayPal thing in it. How do I check to make sure this is a real PayPal?
Not at the moment. Look, we do rely a little bit on the app stores to police some of this. So, it's hard to say exactly the scenarios that we have to deal with, but we do have teams dedicated to this kind of stuff. So.
Any other questions? Yep.
Does your SDK do any jailbreak detection? Like will it want to refuse to run if the device is jailbroken?
Currently not. I haven't tried it. Probably should go home and try to jailbreak one of our phones. Don't tell Apple. And this is recorded. And try it out, see what happens. But no, at the moment, I don't think we're doing that.
One more from you, Matt.
I was just wondering that limitation you're saying about digital goods and things that just apply to iOS.
Android's based. Well, Google has pretty much the same standards. They were a little bit more lax with them until more recently, but they're actually tightening the screws. The other app stores and providers, I think it's piecemeal depending on particular providers and what they have, but basically same rules.
Okay. Great. Well, we'd like to thank the guys from PayPal, and as I said,